Good afternoon. This webinar offers closed captioning. To enable closed captioning, click on the live transcript button on the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred method. Welcome to the Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection webinar. Please note any website or email that I mentioned will be posted in the chat box. For those seeking business license assistance, you can visit us here at City Hall in the Small Business Center or call 312-74-GO-BIZ. Also, business license can be applied for or renewed online at chicagobusinessdirect.org. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you can get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. To learn more about this program, please visit chicago.gov/business education. This webinar is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. We encourage all attendees to ask questions. Please use the chat box when seeing your questions. There will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Please note the views, information, and opinions expressed during this webinar are solely those of the presenter and does not necessarily represent the official policy or position of the Department of Business Affairs, Consumer Protection, or the City of Chicago. At this time, I will now turn this webinar over to Toy from SCORE for us to begin.
Thank you, Geraldine, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Since 1964, SCORE has been the nation's largest network of volunteer expert business mentors and is dedicated to helping small businesses get off the ground, grow, and achieve their goals. SCORE provides free and confidential business mentoring on an ongoing basis to provide continued advice and support, and offers free online workshops on topics ranging from startup strategies to marketing and finance. If you're interested in being mentored, please visit chicago.score.org and submit a mentoring request. Now, I'm happy to tell you that today's presenter is Jim Jaffe. Jim is the founder and chief operating officer of Lion Fleet, where he focuses on procurement and inventory evaluations for nonprofits and helps organizations gain significant savings on capital equipment. Throughout his career, Jim has generated record revenue and profit levels and turned around unprofitable businesses. Jim Jaffe has over 40 years of experience as president, CEO of 6 different public and private companies. He managed a private equity fund and spent 9 years in Eastern Europe and Asia, investing in small businesses in emerging economies. He has been a head of an international nonprofit association and served on numerous nonprofit boards. We're happy to have him with SCORE as well. So thank you, and Jim, take it away.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. The presentation you're going to see today is focused on what do people do when they need money. And first thing is, as Toya has told you, this is a background on myself where I've been. You'll get copies of all this, so you don't need to pay any attention to this thing. So I'm just going to jump into the presentation, but want to note the fact that I do have quite a bit of experience in working with small businesses. I've been a SCORE mentor for a year and a half or so, and probably have dealt with 25 to 30 individual mentees in many different businesses, everything from startups to multi-million-dollar businesses. And what we're talking about today relates to a very, very critical issue, which has to do with money. So one way for folks to think about the business that they are in is some of these items. Is it proprietary, unique? Who's going to buy it? Big question, because lots of times folks get excited about the business, but they're never quite sure who are their customers. Market pain is another issue. What problem are you trying to solve in the marketplace about your business? And then these other things, which are pretty standard, and we'll talk about in a few more minutes, about your management team, the revenues. A big, big deal if you are looking for money from investors is how are you going to scale your business? How are you going to grow it to 10 times what it presently is or what you think it is as you're currently starting out. So a starting point for folks who are entrepreneurs is the kind of business that you want to have. And oversimplifying this, there's two kinds. One is a lifestyle business, and the second is a funded startup. The lifestyle businesses are run by the founders. They want to have a level of income, and that's it. It has very modest capital requirements. They tend not to get a lot of funding. But the big deal is it lets entrepreneurs live how you want to do that today. It's lower risk, smaller time commitments, limited scalability, because you're spending time on your lifestyle. You'd rather have a barbecue than go out and kill yourself in the marketplace. And probably equally important is you don't want to sell it or exit the business. You want to keep going. A funded startup is very different. Their primarily responsibility is to become big at the hopefully temporary expense of the founders. And its primary objective is to provide a return to investors. It's very high risk and there's high reward, requires outside capital, and a key problem for entrepreneurs, it requires a loss of control. You most likely don't end up controlling your business. So the big obstacles in businesses are the time and effort required. You got to have some business management skills. Raising money, we'll talk much more about that in a few minutes. Some awareness of what does it mean to start a business. Lots of people just sort of go into this and they're not really focused on what's required. Very important to have industry and market knowledge. And for example, some of my clients are very small entrepreneurs, people starting a hair salon on the south side of Chicago or a food truck. But even in those kinds of businesses, you need to have market knowledge. In other words, if you're starting a hair salon in a particular neighborhood, are there other ones in the neighborhood that are going to impact you? Many times people overlook this because they get very excited about what they're doing, and that's a mistake. And you need to think about what is your willingness to take risks, a big, big important issue. So the main topic here is all about funding. Where does the money come from? Well, it comes from friends and family. It comes from banks. It comes from investors. It comes from grantors. But, and this is a big important point, when I talk to a lot of people, even if they're startups, they have an image somehow that an outside investor might be interested in them. The reality is investors usually don't fund small businesses. Also, if you're looking to get money from a bank, usually, unless it's very different, they'll only give you money if you have collateral. In other words, if you have a house, maybe they'll lend you something on the equity that you have built up. But lots of people I talk to have a few $1,000s and they're not quite sure where to go. And they have this wonderful thought that somehow or other, they're going to be able to figure out how to get the money. And unfortunately, it just doesn't work like that. Entrepreneurs have this funding myth. They got a bright idea, open the faucet, the money's going to come out. Again, it doesn't work like that. The entrepreneur's goal is not to build a better mousetrap. Everybody knows how to make a better product, but the objective is to catch the mice. In other words, you got to get the money. Having the world's slickest, sexiest service or product isn't enough all by itself. Financial projections are something that is really key to this process. And when I talk to people, particularly startups, and I'll show you some information on this in a couple of minutes, When I talk to people about this, the idea of all these numbers swimming on a page horrifies them. They don't like it. They don't understand it. They may not even know how to use Excel. But this is really key, because whether you're getting money from a bank or an investor or a grant, and grants are something, particularly in Chicago, and particularly for minority businesses in Chicago, grants are available. But again, and even though you can look at a website and say, oh, I'm interested in a grant from the so-and-so philanthropic organization, the problem is that you have to recognize it's probably going to take you 6 months to get the money, and you have to write a grant, something that interferes, of course, with your ability to run your business. So everybody needs to have a realistic marketing plan, and I'll show you what that means in a couple of minutes. Got to understand what the customer needs. And probably most important, and an area that I focus on with my mentees, is what is your branding message? Another reality in money raising is that anybody that's going to invest in your business or is going to lend you money knows that you are serious when you have your own money to put up. And roughly speaking, and this is a rough rule of thumb, you probably need to have 20% of what the required capital is in your own pocket. And if you don't have it, it's very, very difficult to get other people to put money into your business. There are different kinds of financing for businesses, and this will give you a little summary. And as Tonya said before, all of this will be available to you, so you can go back and take a look at it. But when people think about raising money and venture capital and angel investors, the area they're talking about is equity. It's very high risk, and it has a very high return. The good news about equity is you don't have to repay anything like you do have to do when you are having a bank debt. Bank debts have a requirement that you pay principal and interest. And what that means is that comes out of your available cash. What happens with investors is, the good news, like I said, is you don't have to pay it back. The bad news is they want a piece of your hide at the very front end, and I'll show you what that means in a minute. The other bad news is that equity investors, even if they don't have a majority interest at the beginning, they have what are known as ownership rights and control, so that if things don't go well, they can replace the management. And that's something that is really a problem for many entrepreneurs. Mezzanine funding is in the middle. It's like the mezzanine in a department store between the basement and the first floor. What this is that you have a combination of money on which, like a bank loan, on which you pay a high interest rate. For example, mezzanine financing might say, okay, even though in theory, what you can do is get a business loan at, I don't know, 7-8%, they may want to charge you 15%. And they want a piece of the equity. And there's a balance act between these two. But they also have ownership rights. Debt is the lowest risk and the lowest return. The people who provide the debt have no upside return. They don't get a piece of the business. There's fixed payments and a fixed term. In other words, five years, 10%, whatever. But you must have collateral to get this. It's highly unlikely that anybody is going to give you the money. Thing like what there is with the mezzanine debt or there is with the equity. Next, talk about investors. The problem here is that there are enormous odds against getting funding. Literally, there are thousands of ideas. What happens is You might be able to generate interest from 100 people. 10 might give you a serious due diligence, and you get funding. One business gets funded. The objective, if of course you are looking for equity financing, is to be that one. You don't want to be left at the gate and be one of the 10 that doesn't get it. Unsurprisingly, there are academic studies on funding odds. People write papers on this kind of stuff. And this supports exactly what I was showing you a couple of minutes ago. 3,000 raw ideas, 300 ideas submitted, 125, and so on, one success. So a critical issue is you have to have something as your product or services that is so distinctive that it captures the interest of a equity investor, if that's what you're looking at or looking for. But here's the problem. Investors are inundated with requests, and most of them don't care. So how do you get to the 1% that does care? How do you get them to believe in your project? That's a big deal. So you have my attention. If you want my money, make me believe. What investors want, it used to be, and this is a picture of the Hewlett-Packard garage in 1938 when they started HP. It used to be that people wanted what's known as a proof of concept or a proof of feasibility. Does this thing that you want money for work? However, now people want proof of relevance. Who's going to buy it? And that's a big distinction, because here on the Hewlett-Packard approach, you had a great product, you went into business and everything was fine. That no longer works at all. In addition, the face time that you may have with investors is very limited. I call this an escalator pitch. That's what's needed. It used to be that if you met somebody and they were interested in your business, you had 3 minutes to tell them about your business. Today, what you have is 30 seconds, what's called an escalator speech. You're going up, they're going down. How do you get your idea across? Very, very key. And most people don't realize the limited amount of time that there is to do this. Next, I want to talk about business financing. What does it mean and how does it work? Well, this is a complicated chart, but it is relevant to anybody who is going into business. If you have a business that has $1 million in revenues in the 5th year, and keep in mind, this is all part of the projections, so that a business has $1 million in revenues. A rule of thumb, which is not perfect, more art than science, is that a business can be valued at 1 time its sales. So in other words, 5 years from now, this business that you built up, started out modestly, you scaled it up, it's now $1 million. It's called a terminal value at exit. So investors look for 10 times, that's 10x their money at exit. So if they have invested $50,000 today, in 5 years, they want 500,000, 10 times it, meaning that the business is valued at $1 million, and all these projections are done now relating to what the future is going to be. The business is worth $1 million. They want 500,000. They will insist now on they're getting 50% of the equity in your business. This is even before you start. That's how you're going to get the money. But if revenues in the 5th year are $2 million and the valuation is 1 time sales, the terminal value is $2 million. The 50,000 that requires 500,000 is now 500,000 divided into 2 million is a 25% equity give up. That's why the projections that we're going to talk about a little later at some length are very, very key, and they've got to be believable. There's a whole series of reasons that investors don't invest in what are known as good companies. What's a good company? It's very simple. Good isn't 10 times cash in 5 years. Why don't they do this? There are weak barriers to entry. And this goes, as I said, for a food truck, or I have a couple of clients. One is a multi-million-dollar trucking company. I have clients that are all over the place. Psychiatrists who want to open up new offices, art design, printing companies, on and on. Like I said, between 25 and 50 I have dealt with, and 25 to 30 are continuing. What's the differentiation? What's this unsustainable unit economics? What does that mean? Well, if you're selling it for $1 and it's going to cost you 90 cents, but you say it's going to go down to 50 cents and you'll be okay, can you really show people that that is in fact what's going to happen? Sometimes there's niche markets without explosive growth. Well, if you're one of 5 food trucks on the block, that's a niche market. But if there's no barriers to entry and 8 more food trucks can come in, you're sunk. Cap table is how you get the money. We'll talk about that. Founder bait and switch. Does the founder say one thing, get your money, and then do something different? But this is very key to keep in mind when you think about what is happening in trying to get money. So, how do you improve your funding odds? First of all, you need a 30-second verbal statement, which I mentioned earlier is the escalator pitch. What's it for? Who's going to buy it? Why? And how much funding? Then you need a 1-pager, an expanded escalator pitch, and I'll show you this in a moment in what I'm calling the branding approach. And finally, a PowerPoint deck, 12 slides to make your presentation to a organization that is interested in giving you money. So, investors require financial projections, really key. You may not like it, but it's a big deal. And they also require that you have some cash. And finally, you have to be able, particularly if you're getting a loan, to cover the debt. In other words, if you have an operating profit of $10,000 in a month and your debt repayments are $11,000, you can't get the money because they don't believe that you can repay them. So, all investments require a business plan, and this is regardless, in my experience, of whether you are doing a startup or you have an experienced business. I have, as clients, a number of organizations that are in fact experienced businesses, and we're going back to the basics. What are the things that are important in your business? Key, and I'll show you this again in a moment, is a mission statement or a vision statement. What are you about? You have goals. You have marketing goals and financial goals. What are you going to do and when? And then you have action plans that will allow you to achieve each goal. So if one of your goals is you want $10,000 a month customers or $1,000 a month customers, that's a fine goal. But your question is, how are you going to get there? Who do you have to call? What are you doing on your website? How about TikTok, et cetera, et cetera? What are the plans that are going to get you to that goal? And is it realistically achievable? I'm going to come back to this sheet at the end, but this is a model of the financials that I do with my clients. I want to show it to you here briefly so that your head is probably swimming with all of this stuff. But then At the end of this, I'm going to do a live model to show you how this works. This becomes, in my experience, a fundamental piece of whatever somebody has to do if they are trying to get money. And we'll come back to this. Okay. So what I think you have to have for a investor is what I call a 12-step pitch. Focusing on the essentials. This is a presentation. Get interest. Don't cover everything. Don't bludgeon them into submission. And you only have a single objective. Get enough interest to have a second meeting with them. So how do you do this? Well, what I believe is very, very critical is what is called a branding message or a story message, or how do you develop the brand? And it has these elements to it. Number one, your vision for the company. Our company was created to, our goal is, we're focused on, and this is your escalator pitch. This is the brief thing that tells everybody what you're up to. Now, what is the problem that you are solving? There are no food trucks in a 23-block area in the South Side where I want to have one. Or my trucking company can pick up items someplace that nobody else can go to. We have special licenses. There are all kinds of things that you need to focus on and try to remember as a way of getting into this. What do our products include, and why do clients need them? This is all about talking about benefits. There's a big important difference between features. What does something do? A good example is an iPhone. Its features that'll have a gigabyte of storage. The benefit is that you have 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's the way you need to think about how do you brand your project. So your products are affordable and everything, but the benefits are what? What's the value proposition here? Do you have a secret sauce behind your product? What do you believe it will do for me? The market plan. Who are your customers? How are we going to reach them? Our distribution channels and so on. And finally, an understanding of the competition. This becomes a one-pager, which, as I said, at the very top is your vision. This is, when it's effectively done, becomes a driver on your website. This is what your business is all about. And you don't have it say, we alleviate this pain and ... You've thought through how you do this. I use this with almost all of my mentees, and it's a pain in the neck. You have to work through this step by step, and it takes weeks to do. But the payoff is very high, because what ends up happening at the end is you've got a clear and concise message about what you're going to do. As part of the 12-step pitch, you've got the first thing I just showed you a second ago, which is 8 points. Then you need to have in your pitch something about funding, where you're going to get your money, how you're going to obtain it, something about your management team, very key, by the way, when you're looking for outside sources, your projections, a 3-year financial forecast, and a summary. So now go back here, 12 points. These are 8, these are 4. Think in terms of 12 slides in a PowerPoint that you are now going to present to somebody so that they can see how all of this stuff fits together. Okay, cash. Positive cash flow is critical, and you need to have equity, and loans are unlikely. This is the DSR is the ratio of what you have to have as an operating profit versus what you have to pay back. And I'll show you that in a moment on the sheet that I'm going to talk about. So This is the big secret. And this is the only slide you need to remember, the only one. Yes, you can have a copy of this, but this is the thing that you need to keep in your wallet. Funding is not based on great products or services. Every startup has this, every single one. It's based on products or services that increase revenues, achieve profits in 3 years, have a positive cash flow, are scalable, and have a competitive advantage. Now, what I want to do next is I want to stop this screen share, and I want to do a second screen share on something that is very, very important for showing people and yourself how a business works. What this is a way of doing your projections. And I have used this with every one of my individual SCORE mentees. And here is how it works. You start off with your customers for a product. This particular one has 600 customers, but there's a seasonality to this particular business. So this is here showing in the first month, 20% of 600 is what they expect. And as you can see, going along here, 20, 25, 60, up to 100, this is maybe, this could be I have one client, it's a snow removal business. So it's only do they get up to speed here, and maybe they have a few little things back here, and maybe they have 0 here. All of this is live, so it changes as we go along. Basically, what this does is shows you step by step where your money is going to come from, what is your revenue for each product that you are selling, and what is your cost of sales. And this works irrespective of the kind of business that you have. I have a number of clients that are in the catering business, and they have, this particular one is showing 2 different product lines. If you were to press this button, here, this one has the ability to show 4 different product lines, but you can expand this as you see fit. But their catering business, in their particular business, let's say they may have one product where they can sell 600 a month, and a second product that is $29. But here, maybe they have 200 products, but the price is $15. This formula thing will calculate all of that stuff for you. This product is 200, and maybe it's $18, and maybe it's a 30% cost of sales, and so on. So what this is doing, it is showing you in total what is the amount that is taking place here. How much revenues are you going to get each month? And then it shows you the cost of sales. Just picking up, in this example, each one of these line items from each one of these things. Okay, so the next thing that happens is that working with clients, a very, very key issue is expenses or fixed costs. The cost of sales is a variable expense because it goes up and down. It's a percentage, but it goes up and down as your sales go up and down. The cost of sales is the total of all of those things. Fixed expenses are expenses that you have irrespective of what happens in the business. These guys have $4,000 a month in utilities, $1,500 and so on. Staff payroll, they have a staff that they need. Management wants to get money and so on. But next, what happens is that this all adds up to what's called an operating profit. You have revenues, you have minus cost of sales, you have minus this, and look what happens in this particular business. Minus, 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 minus. They're going to lose $122,000 this year. So How do you get around that? Well, the next thing to show you is over here. In this particular business, there are a series of expenses that have to happen before they start. $2,500 in marketing, $2,500 for equipment purchases, $10,000 for inventory. So they have to have $15,000. However, the question is, where's the money coming from? They want to get $50,000 as a loan. And this particular table shows you, this is a 5-year loan at 7%. And there's a loan table right here. If I made this at 10%, notice this 50,000 drops down and so on. If I made this at 10%, what happens is the interest payments will change. Interest payments are always figured on a declining balance. So if you got 50,000, you pay back 33, you now have 48 and so on. But you can change this to anything that you want as you go along. But the debt service ratio in this case is not going to work. They're going to have a huge problem getting money because this is negative. The goal is 1.25 to 1. This is operating income divided by principal and interest. And if this is negative, they're not going to give you the money because they don't think they're going to get paid back. But as you change this thing, let's say we have 5,000 of these things. All of a sudden, everything looks wonderful. What happens is, look at what's now happened with your operating profit. It's positive, 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 positive. You're okay. Here, you have a huge debt ratio, which is fine. So I'm going to change that back, however, and show you what happens here. The cash flow is probably the most significant thing for people to have, and probably the most confusing piece to entrepreneurs. Its concept is very simple. You start out, remember we had $120,000 that we got over here. This $120,000 goes right over here. And this is called cash flow, and it's got to be positive. The first month, you're losing money. That's this $4,000 thing that you're losing. And then what happens is pretty straightforward. The cash flow drops because, you have a negative 4,000. Here, you have a negative 19,000, this money up here. And guess what happens here? It drops to 95. So what's taking place in this particular business is that their cash is dropping. They're starting at 120 month by month with this amount of operating profit. They are now down as they get into these months here with negative cash. That can't work. They either have to have more sales. So what we're going to do is make this 2,000 sales for this one product. Okay. So let's see what happens to the cash. Well, all of a sudden, they are now in a cash positive position because they didn't lose money. These were still negatives. So what happens here is two separate things. And I want to show you one more piece of this, and then we'll go in for questions. This plus will let you change the business model in any way that you want. In this particular example, it was the total was $311,000. We're going to increase sales by 20% every year. And so this just does the calculation. We're saying that the cost of sales is going to improve each year by 0.5%. So it used to be 44, it's going down and so on. Your fixed expenses, you can add this, are going up. So what happens? Look at the same thing that we were just looking at. You have here a negative cash flow. I want to pick this thing up in a moment. And you can't do this because you don't have enough money. You're going to lose money every single year. So basically, What this is saying is that while you may get to the point where, yes, this business is okay here, because now we had $11,000, the problem is that you're still going to lose money and it won't work. So what has to happen in this business is you either have to have a lower cost of sales, let's ignore these two businesses here, just for the time being. And this one will make a zero, and let's see what happens. Well, all of a sudden, as we look at this, your operating profit is not so terrible. It goes up and down. Remember, in this month, we're going to do 100% and 100%. And what now happens is all of a sudden you have a operating cash flow, which is not bad. But remember, you have a problem because you don't have enough money left. Okay, that's all that I wanted to cover on these pieces, and be more than happy to answer any questions that any of you might have.
Okay, Jim, I don't know if Tom is on, so I will look at the questions and answers, questions. Okay, let's see here. Oh, I'm not sure if I have access to it. Hold on for a second. Okay, number one, how does a 12-step pitch differ from a pitch deck?
It's the same thing. I just wanted to define it as 12 steps, but because I think that you don't want to overwhelm people, but it's a pitch deck and a 12-step pitch are identical.
Okay, another question is, would it apply if you have a grant instead of a loan?
A grant is only a source of money. It's a different source. Hopefully it's a free source, and hopefully you don't have to pay it back. But part of the issue is, what is a grantor expecting from the grantee? Well, among other things, there's, as I'm sure many of you are aware of, there's a huge interest in what is known as impact investing, which means I'm going to give you money as a grant. I'm a philanthropy, but I got to know what's going to happen with it. So if your particular business is set up in such a way that you are going to provide services to homeless people and give them meals, and you need money to start, you've got to be able to show them how many meals, the growth rate, you still need more money, et cetera, et cetera. So my reality is that irrespective of the source of your money, you most likely need something like this. And keep in mind, what I'm showing you today is as much art as it is science. It's flexible. Anybody can say, oh, for goodness sake, I could get money from an equity investor, and that's not 10 times, it's 5 times. Of course. The beauty of the model is that you can put in any set of assumptions that you want and see what they mean. But the key is, it's got to be believable. So answering the grantee question again, my guess is you come out looking much better when you have this kind of information available.
Okay. Next question. How do you think funding might differ or investment might differ in terms of hotel developments?
I'm not familiar with real estate. I've done some of it, but not a lot. But again, I would say, and the reason, by the way, that for the one sheet that you saw is I believe that you can summarize everything on a single sheet of paper, a single spreadsheet. One of the challenges I find is that when there's 22 interlocking spreadsheets, it confuses the people who are doing this. You put in those numbers which show number of rooms, average rent per room, et cetera, and a buildup. You're just starting your hotel, and so on. Ultimately, you have to have a cash flow to show what's going to happen. And I find that the model seems to work in broad terms for just about any kind of business. It's not magic. You have to put the right stuff into it, but it should work for just about anybody.
Okay. Michelle wanted to know, what is the expected return when getting funding from friends and family? We're having an investor party to secure funding with our new store.
Okay. If you have a wonderful brother-in-law who wants to give you the money, that's the perfect situation. A lot of it depends, of course, on the family dynamics and the psychology of the people that you're getting the money from. At one hand, somebody wants to gift you the money, and that's terrific. Although nobody just writes a check. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Your mother might write a check, but other people may not, and it's a family thing. What are you going to tell them that you can do for them, rather than their expectations? Oh, your brother-in-law is willing to give you $10,000 and your sister will put up 20, and et cetera, et cetera. Rather than you're thinking that you know what their expectations are, I would recommend you turn this around so that you show them what you can do, and then see whether they're okay with all of that. Because the big problem is this is about money. And even though you got a family and they love you and they want to support you and all of these wondrous things, the contentiousness about when things don't go right are enormous. I mean, it fractures families and everything else. So I think you're a heck of a lot better if at the front end, you can show realistic expectations about your business, and therefore the implication being, here's what's going to happen to your money. Because I don't know, in this particular example, does somebody expect a return on their money? So what? Well, if you start off by saying, hey, we believe our business will do A, we should be able to do B. Are they expecting to have a percentage of the profits? Are they expecting to act like an equity owner, even if they aren't, where they are going to give 10% of your business if you sell it? Lots of loose questions. Many of them can be answered if you complete the sheet that I had just shown you.
Okay. This is not part of the question, but I'm going to ask the question. Did you recommend that this is put in writing for both sides?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think that if nothing else, you need a term sheet which lists the expectations. And it could be as simple as 10 bullet points on a piece of paper, but I would highly recommend, if you're getting money from anybody, that you consult a lawyer and make sure that you and your investors, even if they're family members, are protected, and that there's a very, very clear understanding of what has to happen. You know, this that old Ronald Reagan comment about trust but verify. Everybody trusts everybody, but let's put it down so there's no confusion surrounding this.
There you go. Okay. Elijah has a question, actually has two questions. The first is, sure. I'm sorry?
Yeah, sure,
okay.
Please.
Do investors like to see if you were able to raise money as well as earned money prior to seeking them out?
Earned money. If by earned money, you mean have they earned money, i.e., do they have cash? If you go back to the sheet we were talking about a few minutes ago, people are going to want to know how much you can put into this. One of my charts earlier showed it's probably 20% out of your pocket, maybe it's 10 or something. So the answer is, while they may want to know what you have done previously, the reality is you got to have money of your own. And when I find people who don't have any money trying to start a business and, maxing out their credit cards, I applaud their initiative. But the problem is those folks are highly unlikely to get money from anybody else because they don't have anything to put down. And, the thing about having your own skin in the game is a big deal for investors. So I think the answer to the question is, assuming I'm hearing it right, is yes, they want to see that you've earned money.
Okay. The second question is, how long would they like to see that you've been in business prior to seeking them out?
I don't know. It's a good question, because if you think in terms of what they are looking for, they want to know that you're experienced, you understand the business and so on. I don't think how long you've been in business is as much of a critical issue as the other pieces that you saw on these things, the management team, how your product solves a problem, and so on. The big deal is the believability of what you are presenting. Does this make sense? Does an investor or a family member at least think they're going to get their money back? How do you show that? Yes, a factor in your own background is that I've been in business 5 years and had 3 successful startups, and I have $100,000. That's all a plus, obviously. But is the $100,000 in this particular case adequate for the business? You're not going to get brownie points just because you've done this before. You're going to get brownie points because you're putting cash into the new venture and people believe it's going to work.
Okay. Michelle asks, is there a key to acceptance for getting a government grant for a startup?
I don't know how to answer that question. I think that, a couple of my clients are people who are minority business owners, and you can look up literally in Google, minority grants in Chicago, for example, or women grants in Chicago. There's all kinds of stuff available, but you got to do your homework. And remember, there is competition for grants. Just because let's say the city of Chicago was willing to give out, I don't know, $10,000 grants to 20 businesses. The problem is there's going to be 500 businesses that are after the money. So again, you got to think about how do you distinguish yourself in this process. And so there's no easy solution for grants, because in many ways, grants are the absolute best source of money. You get it and you don't have to pay it back. That's fabulous. That never happens with an investor, and it sure as heck doesn't happen with the bank. So if you can get it, great. But part of the problem is that any entrepreneur has to go down the track of recognizing there's an enormous number of things that have to take place all at the same time, not the least of which is getting the money, but you got to start the business, and you have to have, let's say, a storefront, and you have to have inventory, and you got to do all of these things at once. Now we're adding to that, getting the money, you got to write a grant. Well, there are organizations, by the way, that do grant writing. They charge money or a fee or something, but you have an issue with balancing your time and time management, because here's the reality. Any emerging entrepreneur who is by him or herself starts out being convinced that, they can just kill everything, make it wonderful. Like that little chart I showed you, the faucet goes on, the money comes out. The purpose of this kind of discussion is not to disabuse anybody of that, but rather to say, hey, you really need to think about what you're getting into here. And You need to have a plan, step by step, for how you're going to do this. I recommend that people put down literally on a piece of paper, a task sheet. You know, what do you have to do to make all of this stuff happen? Well, okay. Task number one, I got to look up grantors. Task number two, I have to get a storefront. Okay. Whatever they are, you need to be able to say, oh, okay, I know what these things are. And you have to maybe be able to measure them. What am I supposed to do starting on Tuesday? And how to, because so many people find that there's 20 different things that are going on. They have time to do 10. Unfortunately, what they do is they do 20 things halfway and nothing gets done. So prioritizing is a big deal in this process. Also, they need to be able to lay out step by step, what are they going to do and how are they going to go about it?
Okay. We still have a few more questions. Tiffany asks, actually, she says, great overview and thank you. And then the question is, presumably most startups will dip into the negative at some point. Is it acceptable to be negative for 1 to 2 months? Or must cash flow always be positive and finding ways to sell more?
You have to have the money. Let's assume that you've got a startup and you believe that you can earn, say it's a small startup, and your goal is that you want to have $100,000 worth of business a year, and that's $8,000 a month of income coming in. And let's say that you believe you can grow the business. But after you have looked at your cost of sales, and then after you have thought about your expenses, in the first 2 months, you're going to lose $1,000 a month. Okay. Where's the money coming from? You have to either have money in the bank. I showed you that chart and you can play with this yourself when you get it. How much money do I have to support the business? If in this mythical example, you got 10,000 in the bank, you can afford literally to lose 2,000 a month for 5 months. But your 10,000's gone. So unless you have more sales coming in or lower expenses or a better cost of sales, you're out of business in 5 months. So it's not so much what people are expecting you to do. It's you have to have the financial plan to show what will happen. So in this example, anybody can lose money for 6 months. You have enough cash to cover it. If you do, and then you show a turnaround, it's going to start, scaling up and everything, that's fine. But don't be naive in thinking that somehow or other, you're going to lose money and Santa Claus is going to come out and give it to you. It doesn't happen. You have to be able to cover your cash. And the only way you do it, if you're going to lose, you have to have a nest egg at the front end.
Okay. Miguel asks, what are some ways to find these investors to give them the escalator pitch?
Okay, great question. I think that you have to start by recognizing the size of the business that you are trying to do. Investors, as I've focused on them here, tend to be larger investors. And there are angel groups in Chicago, as there are in every other city, where wealthy individuals put up money. The problem is getting in front of those people. They too, as you saw in one of my charts, are inundated with people who have money. So the best way to do it, if you're a small business and starting out, I believe, is friends and family who will be sympathetic to whatever it is that you are trying to do. Unfortunately, if you need more serious money, the realistic way to get it is not from an investor, but through a bank loan. And if you have an asset which can serve as collateral, that's fine. But it's very, very tough to be an entrepreneur. And unfortunately, people think, oh, I can go to investors and they'll love the product. Well, as you saw in this presentation, I don't think it works like that. So to answer the question, where are these people who have money? Well, I don't think angel groups for small businesses are a realistic approach. I do think banks, if you have collateral, are a realistic approach. I do think grants are wonderful if you can get them and can spend the time and energy doing them. These are for small businesses and startups. And finally, the friends and family. But again, you need, I believe, to know in advance their expectations. So if you think they're never going to want their money back, and in 2 years, your brother-in-law presents you with a bill for the $20,000, you got a problem. That's why the other question about should you have this all written down and I believe you should have a lawyer, you got to cover yourself on that basis too.
Absolutely. Kiara wanted to know, and this is kind of a follow-up to what you just said, is a loan
Mhm.
from a community bank, and she gives the example of Axion, better than
Mhm.
from a larger institution, and gives an example as well. When considering financing, what are some of the best practices? Those are two separate questions.
Okay, there's at least two related issues. Some of the banks are what are known as banks that want to support entrepreneurs, and they advertise all of this stuff. And in theory, they are more sympathetic to somebody who is a startup with a small business. That's the good news. The bad news is all banks want to be paid back, and they all charge an interest rate. So if you have two competing loans and you have two different interest rates, you want to go for the one that has the best interest rate. On the other hand, these are known as term loans, term being a definition of the amount of time the loan is in place. If you think of about your a house loan, what happens in a home loan is any bank will lend you money. I mean, assuming your credit's reasonable and all that stuff, any bank will lend you money, and they will only lend you up to, as a rough rule, 80% of the value of the home. Why is that? Because if you don't pay and they seize your house, they believe they can always sell it for at least 80% of the amount of money that they have done. These kind of investments work conceptually the same way. What a bank wants from you is two separate things. Yes, they're a community bank. They want to support the community. That's wonderful. But they are not a social service agency. So as a result, what you have to figure out is what are their lending policies and programs? You might find, for example, that some of these community banks in parallel will put you in touch with granting organizations in Chicago. They may work very closely with them. That would be the best of all worlds, because if you could get a grant for this mythical $10,000 or $20,000, and then a bank loan, or maybe it's a way of backing it up, that's very good. The other thing, of course, are SBA loans, and the folks in SCORE and others can help you figure out. You can look up what is an SBA loan, what do you have to have, what kind of collateral. You always, unfortunately, need something to back you up. Nobody just hands out the money, or the grantors hand out the money. So the answer to your question about, is one better than the other, I'd say that's a byproduct of how much money they will lend you, what are their interest rates, and realistically, what's your feeling about how supportive they are to a small business in the area.
The next question is actually one that's in the chat quite a few times, and that is, can they get a copy of the documents?
Oh, sure. We'll send you, however one does this, Toma will do it. We'll send you the presentation, but most important will be the projection sheet, where you will be able to put all of your numbers in, any numbers in the yellow boxes, and see what happens. And now that you're all experts in cash flow, you'll know that you've got to keep your eye on the cash flow line. That's the big deal, because if you don't have money at the front end, you can't run out in months 2 and 3. So this will force you to say, oh my God, I got to get this money now. And you'll see on the sheet that, let's say you get zero money from an equity investor. Okay, fine. You have no money of your own. Okay, so you got to then put in the amount of money that you're going to need to drive the business so that you don't run out of cash 6 months from now. It's a very logical step-by-step process so that you can see what happens. And to me, the good news about it is, for the first time, people who are getting into business begin to see the dynamics of money flow and what they have to do. And it'll force you to say, oh my God, I have to sell 100 of these a month, not 25, and I have to raise my prices, or I have to lower my cost of sales. And then you can immediately see what this does to your cash position.
Yeah. The next question is almost they almost anticipated what you were just saying, because the question is from Elijah, what if you're cash poor due to bootstrapping your business and you're out of cash?
You're bankrupt unless your brother-in-law steps forward. The reality behind all of this is not that I am unsympathetic to businesses or startups or entrepreneurs. I've dealt with them for many, many years. The key is you have to, at the front end, see what your cash is going to be. You can't afford to put, your hard-earned cash into something, no loans, no nothing, you do it. You've hired people, you have the storefront because it's a retail shop or something. You can't be surprised because you're running out of money. You have to anticipate that. And what that sheet does, it lets you anticipate the what if scenarios. Supposing I can't increase the sales. Oh my God, in month 6, I'm negative $4,000. Well, now you can say, uh-oh, does that mean that I could have raised my prices in month 5 enough to cover this negative thing? You can put it on the sheet, and sure enough, you'll end up seeing what it does for you. But you can't just run out of money, because literally you close your doors and it's over.
Okay, Cherie has 2 questions, or I'll
Sure.
ask them together. I have a childcare home-based business right now, but trying
Okay.
to venture out into a center. How do I handle it without getting a loan? And she wants to apply for a free grant funding
Mhm.
for a startup.
Okay. So 2 separate things. One
Yeah.
is applying for a grant. Obviously, you have to find out the grant sources. And I have literally done Google searches on this myself for some of my clients, minority businesses in Chicago, or grantees in Chicago, or geographic grants in Chicago. You can find in 5 minutes all the sources of this thing. But let's say you want to open a center. Very noble idea. What does that mean? And let me just arbitrarily say that you have 10 children today, each of whom brings in $50 a day, so that you have $500 a day of income, $2,500 a week, or $10,000 a month. And you can, take the zeros off if it's not that money, but it doesn't matter. Okay. And now you're going to use this sheet I showed you and put in, what does a center mean to you? Well, it may show you that we're, using this seasonality and the growth thing, that yes, you got 10 today, fine. And what you want to do is next month you want to go to 12, and then 14 and 16, and the thing will multiply it all out and show you the money. Next, you need to put down what are the expenses associated with this growth in business. If you yourself are personally handling 10 in your home, that's fine. But all of a sudden, you may now need a place to do the childcare and hire somebody. You got to put that down as needs. Once you do that, you have your growth plan, your fixed costs, you'll see what your operating profit is. So that's the point where you now can think about, how much money am I going to need for a grant? And is very important, in my opinion, that the grantor, as you begin to figure out where the money is, that the grantor sees this plan. They need to know that you can pull it off. And it can't just be, send me the money, I'll do the best I can, because of all the competition there is for grants out there. So I'm not sure if it answers your question, but you'll get the sheet. Try plugging in the numbers and see what it tells you. You may be surprised to find that you don't need any money, because if you have a gradual growth and these extra 2 come in per week or month or whatever it is, and they give you money, maybe that builds up cash for you that allows you now to rent a second room or a second play area or something for the childcare. Lots of pieces, moving pieces, but again, the key, I believe, is put it down the numbers and see what it tells you.
Sabrina wants to know, can you get government funding for a startup or small business?
The answer is sure. You got to find it. I mean, there's no magic here. The Google search is key. I don't know about the government per se. My guess is, well, the city of Chicago is a government. They provide grants to lots of businesses for different sorts of reasons or different venues. All you need to do is look up what's available and see. And it may turn out that you say, oh my God, I really am well qualified for this $50,000 grant from Chicago, but I don't know what to do. Well, among other things, all granting sources will have detailed instructions on what you have to do. But what you may want to do, you can also do a Google search for grant writers. Okay, there are people whose profession is to write grants. It costs money. It costs a piece of what they get or you get at the end. Now, it may not be quite legal to pay them out of the grant money. You may have to have a different source for that, but you can find people who will do this stuff for you. You got to do the research.
Okay. There are 2 more questions about this, the template, the spreadsheet. One is asking, how do they get it? And the answer to that is it will be sent out to you along with the slides. The other question is, does the sheet, they say projection sheet, and I think they're talking about the spreadsheet.
Yeah, right.
Okay, does that apply to film companies?
Film companies?
Yeah.
I have a client who is a film company, and I have another client who is a theater company. Both of them are using this. The answer is sure. Again, break this down into the different product lines that you will be selling. And let's say you're a theater production company. Well, you need to have a flow of what are you going to present in terms of how many people in an audience and how much is each one going to pay. Those are the first 2 lines in that sheet, okay? And let's say, and this is all, of course, speculation, that you're going to charge $50 a ticket, and you expect to have 100 people every 3 months, okay? So you have to have cash money at the front end to pay people for something, maybe not the actors, maybe they don't get paid until month 3 when the production goes on, but you want to put a flow together that will show you, oh, okay, the first month I make no money, the second month I make no money, and the third month, $50 a people, $50 a person times 100 people is $5,000. And I'm going to run this thing for a month. So, $5,000, let's say it's just Saturdays and Sundays, so it's 2 days a week, that's 8 days total. So that's $40,000 of income in this simple-minded example. Okay, you got $40,000 worth of income coming in. You got 0, 0, and then 40,000. So you need to put down on the fixed expenses, what costs do you have? Let's say you're not going to pay yourself for the actors until the money starts coming in. That's reasonable. But you may need to have money for theater rental for 2 months or so. So you put in, oh, theater rental is $1,200 a month for 2 months. So, okay. And you go down the list. You need other stuff. And let's just arbitrarily say that your costs in advance of anything are $5,000. And then all of a sudden, it's now month 3, we're making this money. That's terrific. The problem is the gap between spending the money in the first 3 months and having the money coming in. That's where you need the grant or the loan or the investor or somebody to cover you. And what I'm finding is when people use this sheet who have never dealt with numbers, I mean, they probably know how to use Excel. It opens their eyes because all of a sudden they can see how the pieces fit together. They usually are not able to do that without this. And so that's why, and I mentioned this earlier, I came up with a single sheet, 1 page, that'll answer everything. Now, you can back this up with anything you want. You can have detailed things on the people level and, what is the workman's compensation, and how much is insurance and all of that. But I find if you think of this as a pyramid, the tip of the pyramid is the sheet that you're going to get. Underneath that is anything else that you may need to back this up. But don't drive yourself crazy trying to figure this down to the least tiny detail. Look at it in broad terms, get the picture, and then you'll have a very good sense and direction of where you want to go with this. And most important, how much money are you going to need to fuel this engine at the front end?
Okay, Jim, one person is asking if they can get you to be their mentor. And, and the answer to that.
I'm very flattered. I think the answer to that is write into SCORE and say what you would like. And, they'll do the best they can to assign me if I can or not. But I'm happy to be a mentor. But if there's a huge number of people, I don't know, but I'm going to let SCORE sort that one out for us. Just write in and say you need a mentor.
Yeah, and that's at chicago.score.org.
Mm-hmm.
And submit the mentoring request. 2 more questions. And
don't worry, I'm fine. I'm okay.
You're good? Okay. Rhonda asks, instead of lump sum cash available, can you say that she could contribute X number of dollars per month?
The answer is, of course. Think about what the sheet looked like. I know this all moved very fast. Let's say you have $5,000 today, but you can put in $2,000 a month for the next 3 months or something. What you would want to do on that sheet, and maybe what I'll do, Tanya, is revise the sheet slightly so you can show how you can add in it. So if you'll hold off sending the sheet out,
okay,
I'll fix it up, and in an hour or 2. But in this example, what you would do would have extra cash coming in, another line, and you would put in 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, and it would flow. So it would show the cash that's coming in, what's going out, and so on, but the addition. So the answer to your question is yes, and I'll fix the sheet to make it easy for you to see that.
Okay. And I'm not sure how quickly the information goes out, so please don't expect it today. We will get it out to you as quickly as we can.
Anxiously awaiting people. I understand that, right? Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just making sure people know. Okay, Miguel had wanted to rephrase his earlier question, which was about the escalator pitch, and the revision is, what are some ways that to find those investors to give them the escalator pitch in person? So he's asking, how do you find these people?
That's related to the same question I couldn't effectively answer a few minutes ago. I'll take another stab at the thing.
Okay.
Well, we're looking for people who have money, okay? And the reality is that if you are a small startup business or even a modest business that has something going on, the chances of getting what is known as angel investors, these are the folks that invest in startups, are slim. Now, what you can do is you can do a Google search, angel investments in Chicago, angel investor groups in Chicago. There are a number of them. You can go to their website and see what they require. You may find somebody that is absolutely into, just like law firms do pro bono work, you may find some angel groups are interested and willing to do something for brand new startups that have no experience. Who knows? But you got to do the research. The problem that I'm talking about is most angel groups want to make money. Yes, of course, they want to help small businesses, but they are not social service agencies. So you need to find people or organizations who have money. And that's why I kept, coming back to the grant issue, because people with grants have the money. Yes, you got to go through some hoops to get there, but they may be the far and away best source, because I don't think a bank, unless you have collateral, angel groups, unless you're of a certain size. And remember what I mentioned, you'll see it in the charts, the whole thing about scalability and everything else, and can you grow this thing? They want to make a home run on this thing. They are not just there to lay out the money. So you want to find groups who do. And it could be an angel group, so to speak, within a community bank who has a separate section that is set up to deal with this. I don't know, but you can do research on these things, and it's astonishing what you can find on the internet for this stuff as well.
Excellent. Well, that was the last question in the Q&A
Okay.
box. So I'm going to drop that. And did you have anything else that you wanted to share with the team, with the people?
So let me just, as I said, give me a couple of hours, or maybe first thing in the morning, I'll crank out the sheet and maybe put a few little more additional comments on it so people can see it. But I'm happy to have done this. Hopefully, people can come away either saying, gee, this is terrific, or, oh my God, I never realized it was this complicated. But either one, hopefully you can get some help in thinking about how to grow your businesses.
Okay. I just saw something pop up where someone said that they asked a question, but I don't see it in the Q&A, so I'm not sure
Okay.
where that question is. So
Fine. Maybe they can reframe it for you, or give you a chat or something on it.
yeah, well, maybe if they could put it in the Q&A really quickly, I can ask, but I didn't see it in the Q&A. So let's see if there's anything that pops up now. Projection sheet. Someone says very valuable information, and they're thanking you. And Miguel has another question, which is, do funding rounds of multiple angel investors have an easier time getting funded, or is it better to pursue a single VC for a lump sum investment?
Usually that isn't up to you. I mean, you find the investors and they'll tell you what they want to do. Subsequent rounds in angel investing are very nice to have, but of course, you have to have a viable business that has grown to show people, yeah, we can really put the money into this thing. So I don't think that's the choice of a entrepreneur at the front end. It's much more what the investor is willing to do and what their circumstances are.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jim. You've been extremely helpful and very informative, as you can see from all the questions that you received. I'm going to hand it off back to Geraldine.
Okay.
Thank you for today's presentation. I hope all of our attendees got the information that they was looking for today. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Again, that's bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. To learn more about our upcoming webinars, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Thanks again to SCORE and our presenter, Jim, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Bye,
you. I'm signing off at my end. Thank you.